Hi folks, HR Funk here, with a video that I think I'm going to call Gun Stories. And as I mentioned the title of the video, I'll tell you a secret about YouTube content creators. When it comes to formulating the title of a video, everyone tries to come up with a title that they think will catch people's attention and get them to click on the video and watch the video, because it's all about getting more and more views. That's the way you get more and more popular on YouTube and make more and more money. I know that a title like Gun Stories is not going to generate as many views as something like the new mega awesome super blaster from fill in the blank manufacturer. But that's okay with me, because this video is not really about me, it's about all of you. And this comes about as a result of something I was thinking about over the weekend. I know, jarheads thinking, not a good mix. Anyway, and I actually mentioned this in the live stream last weekend with Dan the Wolfman, and thanks again to Dan for being on the show. But when I posted my last couple of videos on my recently acquired Smith & Wesson Model 27-9, I noticed something, and I've noticed this in the past, but it really caught my attention this time around. I can post a video on the latest, greatest plastic fantastic blaster to come out of XYZ manufacturing. And I'll get comments on it. You know, people will talk about, wow, that looks like it was really accurate, or wow, it functioned very reliably, or that's really convenient, it has great bells and whistles, whatever. But if I post a video on a wood and steel revolver, a classic lever action rifle, a shotgun design that has been around for a long, long time, what I get are stories coming in the comments. There's a connection with those traditional firearms, and people will come in with comments like, oh man, my dad had one of those and he taught me to shoot with it and I still have it to this day. And you know, that person that's posting the comment might have had it for decades and decades at this point, and it's just a very cherished firearm. Or someone will say, yeah, oh yeah, I remember my uncle was a state trooper back in the late 1960s or whatever, and he carried one of those kind of revolvers, and you know, I remember he told me a story about whatever. Or someone will say, I had one of those firearms back in the day and I used it in a match or in some type of training or whatever, and I was the high shooter that day. And again, it always seems to happen with those older traditional firearms. So what I thought I would do, because I enjoy reading those comments so much, is go through some of my own personal collection, and I have an assortment here behind me, and I'm going to tell a little bit about these firearms and the stories I have with them. I'm not going to tell descriptions on the firearms. I'm not going to be doing any kind of technical explanation or anything like that. I'll introduce the firearm, I'll talk a little bit about it, and I'll tell you my story with that firearm. But what I'm hoping this does is generate all those type of comments from all of you. And in the comments section after watching the video, tell me about your stories with your firearms, your personal experiences, the times you shot extremely well, the times that you remember going out with family members or loved ones who maybe aren't still around anymore, and those types of things that you had that were shared experiences that you still think about to this day. That's what I'm hoping this video generates. And again, I don't care if it doesn't get as many views as the new mega super awesome blaster from wherever. So here we go. So first up is a handgun that I have had for many, many years. I actually found this handgun in one of those little roadside gun shops that used to be all over the place, at least in rural America. I don't see them near as often these days, and I miss them. It was always a lot of fun to go in there. The proprietor was usually someone that you knew or you would get to know over time, and you would have a friendly discussion about whatever issues of the day, and you could look at whatever was in the case that day, and there might be half a dozen handguns and maybe about the same number of rifles and shotguns in the shop. And the owner might go out on weekends to a gun show or what have you and do some trading and some buying and some selling, so you just never knew what you might come across. And I went into a shop just like that many years ago. It is long gone at this point, and I have no idea even whatever happened to the owner. But one of the things in the case that day was this Smith & Wesson Model 29. And I had wanted a Model 29 my entire life, and this was many years ago, so I was a lot younger in those days. And the price was extremely reasonable. The only thing I could figure was that he got a very good deal on the purchase or trade with this handgun, and he was passing that on. So I managed to scrape together enough money to purchase this handgun. It's been in my collection ever since. And the story I have with this handgun is that I used it to make one of the best handgun shots that I've ever made in my life. Years ago, walking through my grandparents' farm, I see a groundhog off in the distance at the bottom of a hill, so I had a really good backstop. I had this thing loaded up with full power 44 Magnum hand loads, and I aimed in and squeezed off the shot, and bang, the groundhog was dead right there, never even moved again. And I stepped it off, and it was just over 100 long paces. It was like 105, 107, something like that. So about a 100-yard handgun shot with this revolver at a groundhog, and it's a shot that I remember to this day. So that's my story with my Model 29. Next up is my Marlin Model 39A, chambered for the 22 long rifle cartridge. I've said many times in live streams and probably in a few videos that when I was a kid, obviously there was no internet back in the 1970s, and we used to have to look at catalogs, and the big catalogs would come out, the Sears catalog, the Montgomery Ward's catalog, the JCPenney catalog, and somewhere in the sporting goods section there was always a few pages with firearms. And I can remember looking at the 22 rifles of the day, and there were things like the Remington Nylon 66, the Marlin Model 60, the Ruger 1022, and always there was a Marlin Model 39A with the golden trigger and all of that. And I was a junkie in those days. This was 10, 12, 13 years old, somewhere around that neighborhood. I was a junkie for the 1960s produced TV westerns that were in reruns in those days, and the lever action 22 just caught my attention. I lusted for one for years and years and years, and finally I probably got this about 20 years ago. Had to drive a good distance to a gun shop that had one in stock and purchase it. This is an original JM Marlin manufactured rifle. It's not one of the ones produced by Remington or anyone else. And for a long, long time at the place where we lived before my home now, I was able to stand out on a back deck, and I had a small spinning target. I think it was a 1-inch spinning target that was about 20 yards away at the edge of our lawn, which was right up against the woods. And I could stand there and shoot and shoot. I used to shoot this thing with CB caps. I shot it with Calibri rounds, pretty much anything that was a low power, low noise type of ammunition. And it used to be so much fun to just stand out there and shoot and shoot and shoot. And of course, I've run some more powerful ammunition through it over the years as well. But this is a personal favorite, probably because even to this day, it still touches on those memories from back when I was a kid and I wanted one so badly. So that's my story with my Marlin Model 39A. Next is a story with a semi-auto handgun. In this case, it is a Smith & Wesson Model 5943 double action only 9mm handgun. These were the issued handguns for my police department from late 1991 to about the year 2000. And I became a firearms instructor in 1992. So we had had these handguns for about a year. And during the course of that year, I shot this thing like crazy. Actually, this is not the one that was issued to me. Unfortunately, I was not able to purchase that when the department traded them, but it was an identical handgun to this one. Fortunately, I was able to get this one a few years ago. In any case, I shot that handgun, shot it and shot it. We also did a lot of training as a department in those days. And when I went to my first firearms instructor course, I was there with officers who were carrying Glocks, which were becoming very popular at that time in the early 90s. The instructor had a SIG. There were some other various firearms. And people looked at my Smith & Wesson and they kind of laughed at it, and they made jokes like, oh yeah, we'll use that for a doorstop or whatever, you know, because it's not as cool or whatever as a Glock or a SIG or what have you. And that joking all went on until we started to shoot. And when I used my handgun, my 5943, to outshoot everybody in the class, to include the instructor, all the laughing stopped. And some people were even asking me questions about shooting technique and one thing and another. So That was always a cool memory that I had with my 5943. I always had a special relationship with these handguns, and I am so glad that I was able to add this one to my collection after not having one for so many years. Next is this Smith & Wesson Model 686 Plus, and this handgun is special to me because it was the first handgun, or the first firearm actually, ever purchased for me by my wife. Now, she's purchased several for me since then, but this was the first one, and because it was special, I sent it off to Magnaport and had it customized. You can see some of the custom polishing to the cylinder flutes, the hammer, the trigger, and the remainder of the revolver is finished in a bead blast that you can see there. It is Magnaported, and I also had the action tune. So this revolver is just extremely cool because it was a gift from my wife. And the fact that I had it embellished as a result of that just makes it even extra special. So that's my story with my 686 Plus. Next up is my James River Armory M1903A4 replica. This is not an original rifle, it is a replica. I used this rifle in 2014 at the national matches up at Camp Perry to shoot the absolute best match score that I have ever fired in my life. I was shooting in the vintage sniper rifle match, and that match is fired from 600 yards, excuse me, from 300 yards and 600 yards. And there is a possible of 200 points for a perfect score in that match. Of course, the X count also comes into play. On the day of that match in 2014 with this rifle and this optic, which by the way is a reproduction manufactured by Hilux, which again just is a testament to the quality of their optics. I'm a big fan of Hilux optics. In any case, with this rifle and this optic on that day, I shot a 199 out of a possible 200. I had one shot from 600 yards. I think it was shot number 8, where I saw the crosshair dip just slightly, and I knew when the trigger broke that was a 9 at 6 o'clock, and it came up a 9 at 6 o'clock. But there were only 2 shooters that day who shot a higher score than me, and they had to shoot a perfect score to do it. And there were roughly 500 shooters in that match. And of course, if you're familiar with the national matches, you know that some of the best shooters in the world participate in that match. And the fact that I was able to shoot a score like that in that match at that place, this was the same range where my hero, Carlos Hathcock, shot in 1966 when he won the Wimbledon Cup, and I managed to shoot the best score of my life on that range with this rifle on that day. And if you look it up, you can still find it in the standings on the Civilian Marksmanship website. You have to go back to 2014, look up that match, and then look at the individual standings, because it is a team match. So my score was combined with my partner, and his score was not quite what mine was, so as a team we scored lower. But as an individual, I scored the 3rd highest score of all those shooters on that day with this rifle. And that's my story with my 1903A4. Next up is this Smith & Wesson Model 66 No Dash Combat Magnum. This revolver belonged to my friend ERJG 1954, and a few years ago he asked me if I would take a look at it because it was not functioning properly. And I actually recorded a video, it's still up if you want to go back and look. A previous owner had improperly lubed this revolver, and over time all that lube congealed, and it was to the point where the cylinder would barely turn. And I was able to take the revolver, clean it out very, very well, and get it back to where it's functioning properly. And it is an extremely nice example of a Model 66 4-inch, no dash, no less. And I talked to ERJG 1954, and he reluctantly agreed to make a trade with me for a rifle, and I got this revolver in trade. So this is extremely cool for many reasons. First off, as I said, it's just a phenomenal example of the Model 66 no dash. Also, it's a firearm that belonged to my friend. How cool is that? And it's one that I was able to bring back to life after someone else had improperly cared for it. So that's my story with my Model 66. Next up is my all-time most carried firearm. What I have here is my Smith & Wesson Model 342 Ti titanium frame, titanium cylinder, aluminum alloy frame revolver. And this revolver also came to me by way of one of those little roadside gun shops like I was talking about earlier. But this was one where I got to know the owner very, very well, and we became friends over time. I purchased this revolver from him close to 25 years ago, and he has since passed away. And this little revolver reminds me of him, and also I have carried this more times to more places in more circumstances than any other firearm that I have, because it is so darn easy to carry. And because of that, it is really one of my favorite handguns, and it's one that will never leave my collection. Thank you to my friend, long gone though he is, for selling me such a fine firearm. And that's my story with my 342 Ti. Last one, folks. My Marlin Model 336, chambered for the 35 Remington cartridge. This was given to me as a gift by my son back in 2006. He was 15 at the time. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this, but my son and I went through kind of a rough patch, definitely through no fault of his. And there was a period of time that we didn't talk a lot. And I always had this rifle to remind me of him. And it will always be a special firearm. So, thanks, Ben. Love you, son. Still have the rifle that you got me for Father's Day back in 2006. So there you go, folks. Those are some of my gun stories. I can't wait to hear yours. So please, in the comments section, any questions, comments, stories, anecdotes, whatever that you want to relay, I am really, really looking forward to seeing them. But that's going to do it for now. So as always, if you purchase anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 7% off your purchase from Optics Planet. Also, remember the discount code from House of Pain, either House of Pain Armament or House of Pain Munition. You can use the discount code for either one. It's HRFUNK10, and that'll save you 5% off your purchase from House of Pain. And remember the Target sponsor for the channel. Go to Target's online, check out their inventory, and see if they have anything that's going to meet your Target needs. See you next time, folks. And that time, I'll have a title more like the Awesome Mega Super Blaster from wherever. But until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.